Hi folks, Professor Fowler here, and this is our last forum together as far as discussing terrorism. And so I had a few points here that I wanted to make in addition to my weekly wrap. So let's get into that right now. The first point that I wanted to make is that, as I've discussed during class, terrorism is cyclical in nature over history. And so I think we can expect that trend to continue, so that at times religious terrorism, as now, will predominate, and at other times secular terrorism will predominate. And there are some factors that may tie into that. The world, for example, and the world in the 21st century specifically, may tie into that. It is my firm belief that rising world population, dwindling natural resources, and climate change, for whatever reason, natural, otherwise, or a combination, is creating a deadly mix in this century that at some point is going to explode. I certainly would not deign to predict how it's going to explode, but I do think that that's a very dangerous mix that we're creating. So I think that that will at some point impact terrorism and quite possibly nation-state on nation-state warfare as well. So that's one of the things that we need to consider when we think of the future of terrorism. Another thing we need to consider is technology. I don't know if the rate of technological growth will continue in the future as it has to this point. You know, historically, technology levels out after a time. I don't know that that's going to happen this time or not. We've certainly had more technological change in the last 100 years than in all of recorded history before that time. So those are some really enormous changes, not only in technology, but in the fact that people have to deal with those changes. And that's just not easy to do. People do not necessarily change quickly or accept things quickly. In mathematics, we have what we call chaos theory, and in chaos theory, when you apply it to human beings, the basic premise is that mankind makes its largest steps forward when it's hovering on the precipice and about to go over. So we'll see how that works out in this century. It's an interesting concept at any rate. Radical Islam. For the time being, I think that radical Islam will continue to be the major terrorist threat in the world. I know that we've discussed in class domestic terrorism as well, and certainly that is a concern with groups like Sovereign Citizen and that sort of thing. So we'll see how that goes in this century. But I do think that at the moment, radical Islam is an ideology that is both religious and political in nature, and which seeks to create a worldwide caliphate. I don't think that individual groups create an existential threat to the West, but I think that taken as a whole, when we look at the EU and what immigration policies have done there, and our own policies here over the past 8 years or so, I think that this is a major threat, and certainly radical Islam has made inroads in Europe and is making inroads here as well. So we have the question of what are we going to do about that. I'm hoping that the incoming administration will take a more hard line on the immigration question that we have been debating in the States for a long time now. We'll just have to see how that works out. Other forms of terrorism, I've talked a little bit about that as far as domestic terrorism goes. As the century progresses, I think we will see more terrorism associated with natural resources. If we were to have something like a global pandemic, that would certainly figure into a great deal of unrest as well. So those are things that are hard to predict. The last major pandemic we had that really killed off millions of people was that just after World War I, the influenza epidemic. Were we to have one of those today, with modern technology and the way people move around the world, it could be even more catastrophic. And if that were to occur, that's the stuff of nightmares. We would just have to figure out how to deal with that when it occurs. Of course, that has been looked at among other scenarios, like an electromagnetic pulse that would knock out a lot of the electronic systems in the United States. Those sorts of things have been looked at. It's not that nobody's looking at that, but certainly it's something that we need to consider. And I think that's about it for what I'd like to cover in this particular video. I would like to say that it's been a great session. I really have enjoyed the level of engagement of people in the class, and I know that many of you are engaged in the war on terror. I wish you the very best, and I feel more confident in our ability to fight terrorism when I see some of the people that I have in these classes, including some of you. So I wish you all the very best. Have a great new year, and hope to see you in future classes of mine. All right, bye.